Dr. Murthy, for the introduction and the opportunity to share some of the things we have today on this presentation. So this is more about cloud optimization. The title, as I've put out there, how to cut cost on cloud by up to 50%. And we have definitely seen several occasions where clients have saved substantial amount of their cost on cloud. So let's get started. So my name is Raju Shreewastava. I am the founder of two companies. One is training services, as Dr. Murthy already talked about, which is a training corporate services company. And the other one startup, which we have, a new recent startup, is Cloud Opti. And that this talk is focused from that lens. The talk is going to be very brief and to the point, hopefully. My idea is to really provide a very simple framework for cloud optimization so that people can take this and remember this potentially forever in their life. Is as simple as that, but I think it's very meaningful and profound as well. So with that objective, and the second part, we also have something called as a certification, cost optimization certification. Cloud is growing, and in that, I potentially see as a role for cloud management and cloud optimization, and that is a certification we have created, which anybody can get for free. I'll share those details in the end as well. So let's get started. So a little more introduction. Dr. Murthy had already talked about it, so I'll keep it very brief. I've been fortunate to be part of the data analytics industry for the last 5 years. Have those two companies I briefly talked about. I really enjoy truly to really share and talk. And that's why we have the teaching company, Big Data Trunk, but also we would love to really share whatever we have learned. So that's the focus of sharing through these kind of conferences, meetups, and everything, whatever 2 cents of wisdom we can share to the world. So that's the primary focus. This is me on Dreamforce conference. This is Silicon Valley Coding Camp. I've been fortunate to be author of 2 different books, one for Pearson publication, Big Data High Availability, and the other one is for Microsoft Press, which is on Microsoft Azure. All of that is available on Amazon. Feel free to reach out to me and connect on LinkedIn if you wish to. Happy to connect to people through these kind of conferences and other places. So that's briefly about me, and let's get into the topic. As I said, the agenda is going to be very light. It's going to give some meaningful top pointers and kind of thing. We're not going to go too deep into the technical aspects. So I want to provide everybody a simple framework. We would like to share some stories from the field, real examples of how cost and those challenges and how we have addressed for different companies and clients so that you can see a real feel of what's actually happening. I would love to open up for any question answers. You can already put that in the Q&A mode or the chat. I'll keep an eye and would love to respond to that once we reach that point. And finally, as I said, we would love to give you some details about how to get a certification after doing a course on cloud optimization and enrich your knowledge. You could put that in your profile on LinkedIn and other places. So with that, let's get started. So the cloud is growing. I think there is no dispute about cloud is growing and it's expanding, whether it is any of these clouds which we talk about. The challenge with is as the cloud is increasing, it's getting more and more complex, and so is the cost. Most of the companies get started with the cloud with the thinking that they're going to save cost, which could be done if you use it effectively and optimize it. But most of the time, it ends out being the opposite. Soon the bills are pretty high, and the companies have this challenge of addressing the cost. Companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all the cloud providers for that matter have this aspect addressed or try to address that in some form or shape. But it keeps growing. There are so many variations of challenges kind of in the space. With that in mind, also, if you look on the internet, YouTube, and you will find a lot of videos, content about cost optimization. And they're all over the place. So I talk to Google folks, Amazon folks very often. And when we talk to that, there is no structure or simple framework where anybody can put this together into a very simple framework. Being a teacher at heart, with a teaching and sharing desire, I came up with a very simple concept, and that hopefully helps you to really retain this for a longer period of time. At the very root of this, if you think about cost is very simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. It's something which you can keep in mind. And if you think about the formula of cost, what is it? It's as simple as these two things. One is usage multiplied by rate. You take it anywhere, your electricity bill, how much you use, and how much is the rate. You talk about cloud the same way, which resource you're using, how much you're using, and what's the rate of that kind of thing. So it's very simple. What I want to do is talk about tons and tons of different recommendations and optimization methods, but put them in this lens of cost is equal to usage and rate. So with that framework in mind, you can always go back and think in a very simplistic way. It's very commonsensical, but not followed so much. I think this is very unique. Even Google and other engineers have told me, like, wow, that's profound. I think it's so simple, and it gives a right near simple framework to box it, all of these things. So let's go a little deeper in some of these aspects. So what is cost part of it? Now, you have two levers. One is the usage and the rate part of it. So you can always adjust your rate. You can reduce your usage, like electricity. You can switch off the lights and things like that. You can change the rate with your electricity company. You can go to different preferred program. You can use it during the day and not in the high peak hours, and all of that. You can reduce the rate. So those are two levers in general, common sense example, non-technical example. But when you think about how do you do it? There is an aspect of governance or people aspect, a process aspect, which you have to do, because this is not a one-time thing which you can do and get done. It's not going to happen. It keeps creeping back, and we have seen clients spending millions and millions of dollars, and I'll share some of the stories and examples. So people and process is the important parts of the story. We'll go in deep each of these. On the usage side, there are a few things which you can do, and there are quite detailed items, but I think at a high level, it's all about which resource you're using, how much you're using, and what's your architecture, how you have designed your architecture to really make this application and the resources which you need. So we'll talk about each of this. At the rate side also, there are quite a few levers. I think people think that you cannot change the rate. There is quite a few levers which the cloud providers provide to really address the rate. There are discounts, there are credits, all of that are part and parcel of really making this. So if you think about this framework, if you don't take anything out of today's session, I would want you to remember only this thing. Cost is equal to usage and rate. And with that lens in mind, whenever you think about how can I reduce the cost of my cloud applications, this is a simple framework to start with. And then you'll see 80%, 90% of what you do is going to come in this framework. There will be few scenarios will be go off, which mostly will end up being in the people and this process part of it. But most of this will sit into this two levers and that framework. So let's go one step down. Let's go one by one. So let's look at the cost part of it, or the governance part. What can you do on a regular basis in terms of appointing somebody, or what kind of processes which you can define so that people can be on top of it and it can be managed not only once, but on a regular basis. There are quite a few things you can do actually. And you can assign accountability. That's the biggest part of it. You can assign somebody as an owner for this, checking the bills, which all these providers provide. There are notifications, emails, management reports, and so on and so forth, which can be done on a very, very periodic basis. I would want to just quickly touch on a story which at this point of time. So for each of the aspects, I will touch one story and maybe add some more in the end. So there was one particular client we were working with. It's like a startup which started from zero and soon expanded, and their monthly cloud cost happened to be around 15,000. That was a level they reached at a steady rate kind of rate, and they continue to grow as an organization. Good for them, but along with them, that comes the cost. And within a short period of time, their costs spiked from 15K per month to 25K. And definitely they wanted to be on top of it. They engaged with us and we had discussions and different things. We definitely did a lot of things on the usage side, some in the rate for them. But I think the credit for this, we were able to bring back almost to 15K with the increased usage, or with the right kind of scaling or the usage from the user perspective or performance perspective. We were still able to provide that. But I think the key part was, in such a case, periodic tackling by the top management and getting those reports, define the people and all of that, along with other things, was crucial to be able to do that. So I think that was one story I would want to touch. But there are several things. I will talk about GCP, Google Cloud Platform. For example, they provide a lot of capabilities. So does Amazon, and so does Microsoft as well for Azure. You have lots of things. They provide you capability to build reports. So then send notifications. You can go in the portal and see these reports. It's a matter of going there, being aware, identifying those things. There are alerts and budgets which you can set so that you can define, like, if anything is crossing this limit, I should be notified. I don't want surprises. That's the biggest thing in cloud expense, is the surprise element, which nobody wants. There are things like quotas, not only just give me alerts, but tell me stop it. I think at this point of time, I don't want my bill to go, irrespective, whatever the case scenario is there. It's a little hard restriction which you can put, but if you definitely want to put a high for the cost part and certain higher numbers, but you can define that. So Google Cloud, Amazon, Microsoft, all of them provide a lot of these kind of capabilities. But their main focus is obviously providing these kind of services, the cloud services, resources, new functionality. They do have these capabilities, but that's not their primary focus. And that's where several other companies come into play. And there are several third-party companies. And as I said, like, we have a company, a startup called Cloud Opti, which is a SaaS platform. Our primary focus is cloud optimization. And that's what the focus is there. I think it's a great complementary thing, which on top of it, Google and Amazon, we do. We are partnered with Google already, Amazon as well. These providers actually encourage, they have approved our integration, they have put us in the marketplace, and so on and so forth. So they always encourage such kind of applications in their ecosystem to really put the right expectations for the users and optimization from cost perspective and others. So that's the first lever, I would say, but it's more of an underlying foundational piece more than a lever. And this has to be done on an ongoing continuous review and process, which has to be done in place. So that would be first takeaway I would share. Let's move to the second lever. As we talked about usage, this one is a bit challenging. It's very, very hard. It's almost every single company is either having over-subscribed or under-subscribed. It's very hard to get to the right subscription level because it's a moving target. You keep on changing the resources, their patterns, and so much changes are there. It's a hard one to tackle, and most of the companies struggle with this one mostly. There are a few things that you can look at. What kind of resources are you using? There are obviously virtual machines and DBs which you can have, but lately with the maturity of cloud, a lot of applications have started to move into serverless. So there is a Cloud SQL. In these kind of applications, what happens, the cloud provider themselves is managing them resources. So you don't have to necessarily have any additional resource or a DevOps engineer or somebody to have that. You still have to some, but you may not need to have so much of that in your structure, in your organization. So that's a different model. That comes to the architecture as well. So going to the three on that part, I think, as I said, like most of the times what happens is surprisingly and very, very common, there are instances which are unused. You have large companies, especially when these Fortune 500 companies have these instances, have these clouds, and most of the developers have access. They open the instances, start it. So like a tap left on and forever on, and nobody's looking at it. It's like waste of money. Either they have over provisioned or underutilized. And there are instances also which unapproved, it's not authorized, and people are experimenting and trying different things for their own stuff and several occasions. So there are so many different scenarios which we can talk about, and what causes additional bleeding or leakage in the usage part of it, and which can be addressed manually or automatically as well, systematically, as programmatically in some places. So we'll talk about that. Looking at the architecture part, I think this is on an ongoing basis. Again, the architecture should be also ongoing, but not every single day. You might want to have like quarterly or annual health check or review where you can look at, like, am I on the right track based on our changes, the trends, the increased scale? Do we have to readjust? What we suggest, for example, I was talking about the example of serverless. Companies, especially startups, when they start, to me, serverless and server is, I would take the analogy of thinking about housing. If you think about housing, when you first time, most of the people rent a house in their career, in their life, in the early part of their career and life. But as they mature, they buy a house and they are able to put the down payment and all this kind of things. Same thing I would suggest for a startup to think about that way. When you start a company and kind of a thing, going serverless makes a lot of sense. the kind of cost, actually you're paying more. Same as the analogy I said in renting. When you're renting, you're paying a little more than what you would possibly buying a house, but you don't want the liability. You don't want all to have so many different resources, an expert on the VM, on the storage side, on the database side. So you do not want to hire so many engineers, and you can save that cost, pay a little more on the serverless aspect of it, and that is a better way to start. But as you mature, as your organization matures, your company matures, you get to probably, I'll say, somewhere in the Series A kind of funding or decent level of growth. That's the point you can try to switch over from different the non-serverless options. It would add y'all, the organization, to have their own resources to manage, because that now those elements are not going to be provided by the cloud provider. So that is an additional cost, but at that point of time, it's justified. It starts making more and more sense. So I would give the housing analogy over there, which you can look at lower cost options, and depending on, it's not one fit all, depending on where you are, what journey you, what scale you have, what kind of funding you have, all that depends on. The other option we can look at is open source. There is a lot of open source projects. Apache has so many different applications, and they're really great. There is a different layer of experience, and all that has to be added, but that's an option to think. So a lot of things which you can look at. Architecture, at least once in a year, there should be an architecture review in my mind. Things keep changing, and they keep changing very rapidly in this technological changes. With AI, the trends and all of this thing keeps on changing very often. So I would strongly suggest to keep in mind, like, you have to think about every year at least, if not more than that. And we talked about the managed versus serverless and all of those options. There are spot instances, and I'm going to go in deeper of those, but in short, there are like instances which you can get a very discounted price. But if your applications are okay they can be taken away by Amazon or Google, the cloud provider. But I think they're very, very cheap, almost sometimes 90% cheap. But you have a risk of when they want, they can take it back. So they are just giving you the extra bandwidth they have. They're selling it out at a very discounted price. So it works for them, but it works rightfully if you architecture it for your as well. The dev stage environment, we see clients very heavily built on dev stage. You may not need multi-region settings on dev, but we see that one setting change and you have 5% savings, as simple as that. There are so many small things which have to be addressed. So this one is a big piece. We can go hours and hours on this, but I think this is a very important piece. I wanted to touch a few aspects of that. And at this point, I'll just take another story from the field. So we had another client, a small client. They were not spending a lot, a few $1,000s for them then. But I think for the kind of usage they had, that was also surprising. When we looked at their usage, the pattern, the stage which they are, we thought like, no, you should be spending in hundreds. I think you should not be spending thousands. So I don't get it, why it is happening. And they've said us like, that's from the very beginning. But when we looked at it, there was a very, very simple change which was needed. What they had done is they had put the servers on one region, and then they had put the databases in accidentally, or somehow didn't think through it, or didn't have the knowledge, and put a completely different region, complete different continent for that matter. And now every single job is going back and forth across the continent and trying to pull out the data. A small switch of the region, obviously there was steps to be taken in there, but that switch was able to get them back drastic reductions in costs without any impact. In fact, performance improved as well, right? Because now you're not talking across continent for the data and things like that. So that was, I would love to share that as a second story on the usage part of it and how it was modified. It touches the rate part as well to a certain degree, but that was the usage. So let's go to the final lever, the rate. There is a lot of things you can do in terms of rate. I'll take Google as an example. We work very closely with Google. We are a very close partner with Google, and that's why I'm taking. But similar kind of concepts are there. So there are several kinds of discounts actually which are available by the cloud providers. They have built in a way that they truly want to. Their intent is really good. But if you are going to keep your light on, there's nothing which electric companies can do. And so the same is the same with cloud providers. So they have different kinds of discounts. So for example, there's something called a sustained use discount. So if you stay in a house for too long period of time, but you have a monthly lease your landlord is not going to give a discount. But in cloud, surprisingly, after looking at, you stayed 6 months or 7 months, accordingly, Google does give you a sustained use discount. So you don't have to do anything. You don't have to commit to anything. As you use it, the more you use it, the discounts get applied. So that's one thing. There are some things called as committed use discount, where you commit, you say like for 1 year, it's like almost going back to the housing analogy, 1 year lease, 3-year lease. The more duration, the longer lease you sign up, and the more committed use they sign up, you get more and more discount. They can go anywhere from 55% to 70%. Huge discounts. But obviously, you taking something to be cautious about. You have to know the same thing as housing. Are you going to stay in that house? Are you going to use this resource for 1 year? What if you're going to change your architecture and you think like no more you need these kind of resources? You want to change your architecture to a different kind of storage capability and so on and so forth. So you have to be careful and plan, but you can get huge discounts. Sustained use discounts are up to 30%. The committed ones go to 50 to 70%, and so on and so forth. There's a third kind of thing not talked so much as the contractual commitment, where you can say like, I'm going to spend, and especially large companies, like you will be surprised the kind of bills which a lot of Fortune companies have. And I'll talk about one of the stories in a bit about that as well. You say like, we are going to spend 5 million guaranteed. And if they don't use it, they have to pay. There's no getting out of it. So that's, again, a double-edged sword you have to be careful about. There are other credits which are available. So if you're a startup, pretty much all the providers give you a startup credit, a decent amount, a few thousand credits at least, $1,000, $2,000. They are helping you, but it makes sense for them as well. So they are investing actually in small startups. But as you grow, you may become the next Uber or next Airbnb and big organization. Very unlikely people are going to move out of that cloud once they build that infrastructure. It does happen, but that's where they take that investment back, that 100x, 1000x growth of that one company get fill in all the cost which they have given it to thousands and thousands of startups. But that's a good starting point. So if you are a startup and not using it, please go to your provider, ask for that, go to your partner via a reseller as well. So I think your reseller can help you with that. A lot of the providers, for example, Google will give you a competitive discount. If you move from AWS to Google, they will give you a discount because obviously they want to get that business and grow that business. Similarly, there is credits when you provide contractual obligations and so on and so forth. So that's on the rate part of it. So let's touch some more stories from the field. So why did I come up with the idea of Cloud Opti and how did I go about it? So this is several years back, a decade plus back, when I was in the corporate side as an enterprise architect in a Fortune 1000 company. We started with AWS. Google was very early at that stage. In fact, it was not. I'm talking about 14, 15 years back. Amazon, we started on. Soon the bills were as high as millions and millions of dollars within months. That kind of high, and such Fortune 500 companies pay huge amount of bill. All that surprise in an architecture team, I think I was tasked to really look into that. I did several things. I think a lot of that has been automated and put into Cloud Opti. I talked with AWS to see what we can do together. They were very early stages also and wanted to do several of these discounts and patterns and advisory, and they have tools which are built. We discussed that. We talked to our internal teams, put some processes in place, understand the usage, understood the regions, and several things. And surprisingly, was my surprise as well, the kind of saving which I was able to bring is $250,000 per month for just saving. Think about the actual cost of what they're paying and kind of thing. So it can be a huge amount of savings which can happen. I really request and plead a lot of startup people or companies, large companies, to not lay off people, or first think about the cost reduction which you can get on cloud. This is a waste of money. Like you have kept the light on and they're paying the more bill, and you could save some people's job. I think there is definitely a lot of fat available in the cloud expense and those things. So I think this is very timely. People should think about those things first before considering to lay off people. So that's my humble request for any company or manager or team to really think about these things. These are free money. I think there is definitely, I can guarantee any company, at least is 5 to 10% is there, even if they are the best of kind of thing. There are different tools and capabilities. So I urge that request to that. So that was my aha moment. And I went to different clouds and different companies and saw this is just ongoing. And I think it's the same pattern. And then we packaged all of that into Cloud Opti. So this is our tool, a SaaS-based platform, which does a lot of these things automated and has that a platform. At this point, I will take this example as actual client example. This client is a startup, and I like this company for two reasons. One is their cost is not that high. It's like a few thousand. This is a demo, I think, mocked up kind of thing, first of all. But if you see similar example, they have like, I think, a few $1,000s of bill. So it's not huge, but they're just rolling out. They're starting a pilot for one region in particular, very small demographic. They're going to scale 10 times, 100 times. So they are trying to be proactive and try to address that right upfront itself. So that's a very smart move by them to be on top of that game. We were able to identify on the serverless side several of these applications at this point were less than 5% usage. Some of them are multi-region. All of that changes we were able to do. And if you can see, like, we were able to bring 35% of cost reduction. And as they continue forward, it will almost become 55% of saving for this client. So another story, another example. In interest of time, I'm going to keep moving, almost there. So what we do in Cloud Opti is not just cost. Cost is just one pillar out of the four which we have. We think cloud optimization is a broader topic. It has four pillars: cost, performance, security, and compliance. All of that have to be optimized. Once you have that, then you can say your cloud is healthy. And how do you say that? So we have developed a very unique proprietary feature. We have trademarked that, something called as Cloud Score. So this is similar to what credit score we have in the US. Everybody in your life for sure has checked a credit score some point of life to take a loan or credit card or whatever. But there is no cloud score, surprisingly, in the industry. So we are the only company which has a trademark solution for Cloud Score, which can tell you the score. Surprisingly, not neither Google, neither Amazon, they have it. We have that score capability, and that's trademarked by us, the word itself also, and that concept. It helps you to really keep an eye of how you are as a manager and executive. You can know at a big picture level, how is my cloud? Is my team doing the right thing? How am I comparing to my competitors? How am I comparing to my industry? None of that data is available, and we are pioneering. So we consider ourselves as the experience, that TransUnion, the health check company with the financial side. We are the similar on the cloud side of things. So that's in brief. You can always take we have a free account, always free account, no credit card required. You can try. There is nothing to lose there. And I guarantee that you will have 5 to 10% reduction, at least, for free forever. Then that free plan you can always keep. In interest of time, I'm just going to jump into a few things. I think I was almost there. So I talked about certification. I think this is a growing area, and there is a lot of moving targets. Cloud is changing, security and several applications keep changing. So knowledge is very important. So we are big into sharing and educating and creating awareness. With that in mind, we have created a course, a program, completely free. So you can go to our site and go to Cloud Academy, Cloud Opti Academy, and then all this link, you can go to our site, cloudopti.com, and get that. You can sign up for that. You can complete that course and get a certificate, which you can put on a LinkedIn profile and something. I think as somebody matures or becomes an architect, I think this is a must-have skill in the cloud for anybody senior and as you mature in your career. So, and it's a very good one as well. Company to company, you can transfer that. Your projects may not transfer your next company. That knowledge may not be good, but this is life skill I would consider as. So that's available for you all. If any questions, open to that. We're just in time. And feel free to reach out to us and email us at info@cloudopti.com or check out on cloudopti.com. So with that, we come to the end of the session. More than happy to answer any questions anybody has.